So that's a very interesting thing as well. Okay, the third thing, and I think this is important. The ascension is important in knowing the complete Jesus. Too often there's times in hearing stories or hearing sermons of Jesus that we pick and choose what we want to believe. We pick and choose if we want to just listen to the Christmas Jesus or the Easter Jesus or the Jesus who talks about love all the time. We want to listen to that. So we don't know the complete Jesus. It's just like we're people that like to segment things out, you know. First semester, second semester, 9 weeks here, 9 weeks there, 9 weeks there. Okay. So we all look at that in that way when we have a semester, but yet we still look at it as a teacher. You still look at it as a complete year, and you try to accomplish one thing, but you still segment it out. And so we segment out Jesus, but we can't just segment out and just say, I'm just going to worship Christmas Jesus. So anyway, this is what I call this. This is what I call it. I call it the Ricky Bobby effect. Yes, I don't know if you know this movie. I'm not saying you should go watch it by any means at all. You should not. But Ricky Bobby, this is a movie that is dealing, he's a NASCAR driver, which is perfect for today. I guess it's the wrong car, but he's a race car driver, and he sort of goes over the top and everything. I think the things up here, it says, the story of a man who could only count to one. And so anyway, just want to know first place. But it's all over the top, and it's never mind. But you shouldn't watch it. But anyway, there's this scene in the movie. There's this scene in the movie where they're sitting around the dining room table, and they begin to pray. And Ricky Bobby, he only wants to pray to little baby Jesus. And so he always says, little baby Jesus, little baby Jesus. And that's all he wants to pray to. And so I think his father-in-law tries to convince him that Jesus grew up and had a beard, but I think that fell to a deaf ear. But anyway, we do that with our faith. We do that with our understanding of who Jesus is. We only segment it out, and that's what we like. And so we're not going to learn everything. And so with the Ascension today, we need not to finish Jesus' ministry at Easter. And we need not to end it after he talked to the disciples in the upper room. We need to end it in understanding with Jesus ascending into heaven. Okay? And so we have to understand that. And we have to understand we cannot be people who only segment out Jesus. We cannot be people who say we only talk about Jesus we only like Jesus when he talks about heaven, and not when he talks about separating the sheep and the goats, and when he talks about the horrible thing of hell. Okay, so we need to understand everything that goes on with Jesus. And that's going to be better for us. And that's what's better for us in understanding the Ascension today, that we need to understand it. So, don't have the Ricky Bobby effect occur to you. Okay, so anyway. So the next thing I want to look at is actually we need to go back to the Old Testament and look at a couple individuals just to see what was going on with them. Two individuals that were very righteous, two individuals that were very impacting in their ministry and their lives, two individuals that we hear about and we know today. We see movies are made about them and all this kind of stuff. But we go back. It's just like, we just go back. It doesn't mean that we transform back to wearing robes and carrying big canes and stuff, but it just means that we can learn from them and grow in today. And so when we look at Moses, Moses was a man who was definitely very righteous. He was floated down, and Pharaoh's daughter picked him up, raised him, and killed somebody, and then he ran off. He was scared, but God said, I want to use you. I want to use you to change this world. I want to use you to help lead my people out of this land, and I want you just to be an amazing man that helps my people go to the promised land. And so Moses, these are passages that are looking at Moses at the very end, where he's trying to find someone who will follow him. Moses is realizing that his days are almost over. He's realizing that his time is almost up. And so he's realizing that there needs to be someone that will follow him. And so let's read these passages and let's look at some things here. So the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua son of Nun, a man in whom is the spirit of leadership, and lay your hands on him. We see here that there's words of spirit, the Spirit being with us. And so often we just think that the Holy Spirit came on later. But we need to remember that the Holy Spirit, the triune God, has been from the beginning and will be there to the end. Okay? So the triune God is always there. And so we see here that Moses is talking about laying hands on Joshua so that he will receive the Spirit to become the successor, to become the person who is going to lead the people following Moses. And then we go on into Deuteronomy, a verse in Deuteronomy. Now Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands on him. So the Israelites listened to Joshua and did what the Lord had commanded Moses. So that's what they were doing. We see this sign with Moses that he was laying hands so that the successor would receive the Spirit. Okay? Joshua was going to receive the Spirit. Another interesting thing that we sometimes skim over in our Bible is that when we see that at the end of Moses, it says, after Moses has died, and it says, only a few people know where his grave is. And that's sort of interesting. Not everyone knows where his grave is, okay? But then we move on to another character, and this guy is the bomb. This guy he's a prophet, and he just is really happy. I mean, pumped up for Jesus. Pumped up for God. And he's just a big prophet. And I talked about this a couple years ago on the ski trip. How Elijah was a trash talker. He invented trash talking because he just said, "Hey, you people and your gods are wrong, and my God is mighty." And God, of course, lights this big fire on top of a mountain. It's really awesome. Elijah's a great guy. But something that we also need to understand is that Jesus is not the first person, not the first one to ascend into heaven. Elijah, in fact, ascended into heaven. Okay? And so we're seeing some parallels here with the passage that we just read. And so here's the story of Elijah, the end of Elijah. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, which, thank you for the convenience of, the Elijah and Elisha. That's it could be like Elijah and John or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, two similar names. When they crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elisha replied. "You have asked a difficult thing," Elijah said. "Yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours. Otherwise it will not." As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Wow. So Elijah ascended into heaven. Okay? And what's cool is that leading into this passage, Elijah and Elisha, they were walking and they walked across the Jordan. And all Elijah had to do was touch the Jordan River and the waters parted and they walked across. And then when Elisha was leaving, when he was leaving, all he had to do, after Elijah descended, all he had to do was touch the water. And the water parted and he walked across. And so we see that when Elijah goes up, Elisha now has this spirit upon him, this power upon him to lead God's chosen people into having a better understanding of who God is and having a relationship with God. And so it's very interesting. So there's some parallels here between the Elijah and Moses story and the New Testament story of Jesus ascending into heaven. We see here that before Joshua and Elisha can have the Spirit come upon them, Elijah and Moses actually have to ascend, have to be done. Okay? And then we also see here that Elijah ascended and Moses' grave is hard to find. And that's just like Jesus. I mean, the question that we can ask ourselves here today, and this is an interesting question to ask, is would you still be a Christian if someone said we found Jesus' bones? Would you still be a Christian? And the answer to that would be no, because Jesus ascended into heaven. Okay, so there's no grave here for Jesus. There's no grave here for Jesus. Okay? Okay.